The debate about William Afton being dead or alive inside Springtrap is one that seems to have died down in recent years. People's opinions on it still do vary, but not many people care much to debate or argue about it because it doesn't affect too much in the lore. But today I actually do want to try settling the debate because I think I have a definitive answer on whether or not William Afton is alive or dead inside Springtrap. I'm also going to talk about what exactly happened to Mike in this location and the true effects of Remnant. So now, let's get into it. Originally, I firmly believed that William Afton was dead inside Springtrap and just possessed the animatronic. The biggest reason I thought this was the fact that in Donko's interview with Scott referred to the body inside Springtrap as a corpse, but when the Man in Room 180 came out, I started to believe that he was alive, and that a similar situation to it also happened in the games. I believed William Afton was still alive inside Springtrap and was being kept alive by Cassidy as the perfect torture, because when he's spring-locked, if he's kept alive he will never truly stop feeling the pain. But then the FNaF Ultimate Guide came out, and it flat out told us that William Afton continues to possess the animatronic. Over time, I started realizing that the Ultimate Guide isn't really reliable, and it's at least more accurate than the previous two Freddy Files books, but that's not really saying much. However, even still, I continued to believe that William Afton was dead inside Springtrap. There's two huge pieces of evidence that completely prevent William from still being alive. There's a few pieces of evidence people use to prove William Afton is alive. First, William inside Springtrap in the books is alive, however this actually goes against him being alive in the games, as I'll talk about in a little bit. Second, William is alive in the Man in Room 180 and is being kept alive by a spirit, which is supposedly evidence that he's alive and being kept alive by Cassidy in the games, as I said before. And the third and final main piece of evidence is that in FNaF 6, during a salvage minigame, you can hear a heartbeat. But this doesn't really mean anything in my opinion, because there's nothing really suggesting that this is William's heartbeat. It is entirely possible that it is Michael's, especially since Mike probably believed he'd gotten rid of Springtrap in FNaF 3, and seeing Scraptrap worries him, which is why we would hear his heartbeat. I've also seen people say that the heartbeat is also in Scrap Baby's salvage minigame, but I'm not quite sure if that part is true, but if it is, that furthers my point as Mike has also seen Circus Baby before, and would now worry about seeing her again. But as for those other pieces of evidence to supposedly prove that William is alive, they are explained away within the proof that he is dead. First off, the Twisted Ones. This is probably something you haven't thought of for why William would have to be dead. In the Twisted Ones, William Afton is trapped in the Freddy's building after it was demolished. When people start dying by springlock failures, Charlie thinks William might be responsible, so she goes to Freddy's to make sure his body is still there. And it is. But it is specifically pointed out that William's body isn't rotting despite it being a year. And of course, the reason for this is that he's actually alive. Were he to be dead though, his body would have rotted, and seeing as how Afton in the games does rot, his body is clearly dead, because it's showing that this is different. But people argue that Michael's body rots and he is still alive, but I already explained that in another video on when Sister Location takes place. But basically, people say that William could be kept alive by Remnant, but Remnant regenerates you, meaning William wouldn't be a decaying corpse, he would be a fairly normal looking human being outside of being trapped as a broken green robot furry. And if he was kept alive by a spirit, then again, he would still have no reason to rot, because that means his body never actually died. Some people say William died and possessed his own body. I'm pretty sure that's not how it works, but that would still mean he is dead anyway, and it would just make more sense to me if he possessed the Spring Bonnie animatronic. And the other pieces of evidence is something I think is pretty definitive, and it comes from one of my favorite Fazbear Fright stories, but also the one that seems to give the people the most headache: the New Kid. In what might be one of the most intense scenes in any FNaF book, we see Kelsey get spring-locked, and you can hear the pain and agony in his screams yelling for help. I mean, we can't hear it because we're just reading, but like, you can feel it when you're reading it, I guess, if you know what I mean. His arms get stuck in a T-pose, just like Springtrap in the Final Follow Me minigame from FNaF 3, and we also see him twitch, again just like Afton in Follow Me. Basically what this means is that this Fredbear suit and William Spring Bonnie Springtrap suit are the same type of Springlock animatronics, and the same areas would have been damaged and destroyed. So why am I telling you this? Well, it ties into what happens in this scene of Kelsey getting springlocked. Kelsey goes on screaming his lungs out until suddenly it stops. Kelsey is still alive, so to speak, so why does the screaming stop? Well, it's told to us in the book why he stopped screaming. The spring locks severed his vocal cords, and that means the same thing should have happened to Afton. And since he can talk in FNaF 6, we know that he must be dead and that his spirit is talking through the animatronic. I've also heard the argument that Afton speaks through Springtrap with Afton's voice and not Springtrap's, but this argument is completely incorrect. As we hear in Ultimate Custom Night and FNaF 6, the puppet has a female voice despite being a male animatronic, meaning puppet speaks with his spirit's voice, and it's entirely possible for the other animatronics to act the same way, or at least some of the other animatronics, including Springtrap. And it makes sense in William's case because when he was spring-locked, Afton's corpse was tied into the endoskeleton, tying his spirit more to the animatronic than other characters in the series. So, if Afton's vocal cords were severed in the springlock failure, but he can still talk in FNaF 6, he must be dead and possessing the Spring Bonnie animatronic. And this also makes sense with what Phone Guy says in FNaF 3. Springlock animatronics turn and walk towards sounds they hear, and Springtrap does just that in FNaF 3. Now that we've finished talking about why Afton is dead inside Springtrap, let's talk about some related topics, starting with the new kid. We know from William in the Silver Eyes that if you I was about to say if you subscribe to a springlock failure. I don't think you should subscribe to that. That's not great content. We know from William in the Silver Eyes that if you survive a springlock failure, you will have scars all over your body. And like I said before, your vocal cords will be sliced. A question I have about the Silver Eyes William, though, is how is he talking if he's been in a springlock failure? Well, here's the thing. William's body, for the most part, died the first time he got springlocked, the time before the events of the Silver Eyes. We know this because William's eyes are literally dead. It's mentioned in the book that William's eyes look like they died a long time ago. So he basically died but also survived, just like Mike in Sister Location. I think William in the Silver Eyes had already created Remnant, only from another place. In the fourth closet, he creates Remnant by melting the classic animatronic endoskeletons together, and then he injects them into the Funtimes and himself. He also survives a second springlock failure, and by that point the injuries of two different springlock failures is too much for his Remnant to heal his body, but it still keeps him alive. How is he still alive in the Twisted Ones before he even obtains the fourth closet Remnant? Simply, he had Remnant before. It's unclear from what, but I think it's clear that he did. But even still, he had the scars. What I'm getting at is that Kelsey cannot be a regular kid. The reason behind this is that Kelsey, after his springlock failure, can speak, despite his vocal cords being severed. We also don't hear at all about any scars. And what I'm getting at is that Kelsey is actually a spirit who is actually haunting Golden Freddy. Inside the body of Golden Freddy is the body of Andrew instead of Kelsey. That means Kelsey wasn't ever really there. He was just a spirit. Some people think that Kelsey could be a projection from Andrew, but I don't think that's the case. Kelsey is definitely Golden Freddy. At the end of the story, Golden Freddy attacks Devin, which makes sense if Kelsey is Golden Freddy. Earlier in the story, Devin explicitly says that Kelsey looks like Golden Freddy. Well, yes, some other characters throughout the series look like animatronics, such as Pigtail Girl and Circus Baby. It's never explicitly called out like this, and I think this is trying to tell us that Kelsey is Golden Freddy. In the fourth Fazbear Frights epilogue, Andrew tells Jake that he doesn't want to kill people or even hurt them, he just wants to scare people, and given what Golden Freddy did to Devin, it doesn't seem like an action Andrew would do. Not only that, but it's implied that by the time of the new kid, Andrew's spirit has already attached to William, so Kelsey is a different spirit from Andrew. Kelsey is a huge parallel to the Bite victim, and Andrew is a parallel to Cassidy. So a Bite victim parallel and a Cassidy parallel both inhabit Golden Freddy? I'll let you decide what that implies. But now let's get into something I discovered quite recently. Information we've had since FNaF 6, but something no one really noticed, and everyone misunderstood since the game came out. And this information comes from the Insanity ending. The effects of Remnant and how it works. If you want to see me go in depth on the Remnant in the Funtimes and the Scooper, watch my video on when this location takes place because I explain it all there. But basically, Remnant is any melted, haunted metal. It really doesn't matter what it's possessed by. It could be an emotion, could be a spirit, and it could be something else entirely. A connection I recently thought of for Remnant is poutine. And I know that's weird, but like, just think about poutine for a second. Poutine is fries with gravy and cheese. Think of the fries as the metal of the Remnant. It's the base. Now think of the gravy as the possession. Now it's just haunted metal though. If that was all Remnant was, every single possessed animatronic would be Remnant itself. And as implied in the fourth closet Candy Cat stories and the later epilogues, Remnant has to be melted, and the melting is the cheese. If you just have gravy on fries, that's not poutine, it's just gravy with fries. But if you put the cheese in too, then you have poutine. And haunted metal isn't Remnant, it becomes Remnant when you melt it. So with that being said, what are the effects of Remnant? Well, as I talked about in the sister location video, Remnant is able to regenerate you, but you will still need medical attention. It can keep you alive, but it can't bring you back to life. It can regenerate lost organs as well, but the interesting thing comes from the insanity ending. It is mentioned that inside the scooper is the Remnant reservoir. Obviously, a reservoir is like a source of something, so the source of Remnant is literally inside the scooper. We know from FNaF 6 that the Remnant in the fun times in the games is the same as it is in the fourth closet, which means that inside the scooper is a clump of amalgamated haunted FNaF 1 endoskeletons, and this makes sense too. The scooper is a Remnant injector, so it does make sense if all of the Remnant was stored inside it. One problem people have with the FNaF 1 spirits being in the fun times is that Afton was spring-locked after collecting the endoskeletons, so how could he have put them in the fun times? But it's entirely possible that he left and came back to steal the safe room, which is when the slight bits of the spirits that were left inside the shells of the animatronics got him spring-locked. But it wouldn't really make sense for there to have been too large of a gap between Night 4 and Night 5's Follow Me minigames. But I have an idea of what could happen. If the scooper is a Remnant injector, which we know it is, what if the scooper was what was used to infuse the Remnant into the fun times? What if Afton put the Remnant into the scooper and just let it do its work? As one of the technicians says on Night 4 of Sister Location,
"It's all automated. We don't have to be here for it. Just get it on the rollers and we can go."
So maybe William let the scooper do its work on the fun times while he goes back to the FNaF 1 building and gets himself spring-locked. But there's more to talk about when it comes to the scooper. In the blueprints, there is a note that says, "Leave trace amount on the interior, usage/overexposure negates effects." Remnant's main functions are regeneration and keeping you alive. But what this seems to tell us is that if you are injected with too much Remnant, it won't keep you alive. It won't kill you instantly, but it will start to kill you slowly. But the spirits in it would still have a consciousness, so they can still do whatever they please as long as it is contained within the Remnant. It seems like that's what happened with both Michael and Carlton in the fourth closet. What if the reason they are slowly dying is not because of the area it was injected to, but rather the amount that was injected into them? And that makes sense considering the scooper was likely meant to put Remnant into the animatronics, and if it put the same quantity into a human, it likely wouldn't work the way it was planned. But there's one last thing to talk about. At the bottom of the scooper's blueprints, there is a quote that has led far too many people to believe that Remnant burns in fire. But the note says, "When heated, no observable motion. Keep in heated tank at sustained temperature. Substance should be malleable, but not more. There's a possibility that overheating might neutralize the effects permanently." The important thing about this is that it mentions that there is only a possibility that it might neutralize the effects. Might. A possibility that it might neutralize the effects. This is why it boggles my mind that people think it's impossible for the blob to contain the missing children's spirits, because it's literally not even confirmed that Remnant can burn in fire. And even if the blueprints had said it was a certainty, Remnant doesn't burn in fire. All it says is that the effects of Remnant might be neutralized. The effects. The effect of Remnant is regeneration and keeping you alive. In the case of Michael Afton, the effect is keeping him alive, so when he is burned in FNaF 6, it would no longer keep him alive, and the fire itself would kill him. The effect of Remnant would be stopped, but the Remnant itself would not. And that's why the FNaF 6 fire almost definitely killed Michael, and the missing children's spirits had no way of escaping the blob, which is why the missing children are almost certainly still trapped within the blob. And Happiest Day has not happened yet at this point in the timeline, and I think it will most likely happen in or after the events of the Security Breach DLC. So Afton being dead may not seem important instantly, but if you think about it, there's a lot more to it than that. And also, it debunks a theory a lot of people have had since late November. What theory? Well, that's gonna have to wait for my summary video on the final Fazbear Fright story, You're the Band. But anyways guys, I hope you all enjoyed this video. If you did, then please do leave a like and subscribe. I still have a few more theories left before my FNaF timeline, so be sure to stay tuned for those, and I'll see you all in the next video. Bye guys!